You are listening to Dog Decks Radio, the nation's animal station.
Today we welcome Dana from the Wolf Conservation Centre, an organisation that promotes wolf conservation through various programmes delivered from their base in America. Dana and I talk about breeding programmes and strengthening wild wolf populations. We talk about education and scientific research and the loss of wolves' lives at the hands of humans. This is what Dana had to tell us.
Listeners, we've got a big treat for you this afternoon. We have Dana all the way from America, from the Wolf Conservation Centre, to talk to us about the marvellous work that we do over there with wolves. Hello, Dana. Welcome.
Hello, Michelle. Thank you.
Dana, can we start by talking a little bit about your organisation? When did it start and what was its purpose?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Wolf Conservation Center was founded in 1999 in New York. So we're about probably an hour and a half north of New York City. We're not terribly far. And it's a nonprofit environmental education organization. So we are really working to reach a lot of people through education, increase advocacy, and of course work on the recovery of some of our endangered species. So we at present have 38 wolves living on site. I'm kind of thinking in my head about how many currently, because that number sometimes changes, whether there are releases, births, things like that. But at the moment we have 38 wolves, and the two kind of primary species that we have there are the endangered Mexican gray wolf and the critically endangered red wolf. So we're really working to recover these species. We participate in some breeding programs, and our hope for many of our wolves is that they might get a chance to be released into the wild.
That'd be really cool, wouldn't it? Are you the only centre that does that type of work in America?
We like to think we're unique, but we're certainly not the only center that's focused on wolf conservation. There are quite a few of varying kind of degrees. So we work with the Mexican gray wolf and the red wolf, but there are other facilities that might work with one of those species, both. They might also take in, maybe wolf-dog hybrids. They might be more of a sanctuary. So there's a wide variety. There are 53 Mexican gray wolf facilities in North America and 43 red wolf captive facilities.
We often don't know exactly where we should be going and who we should be seeing and who's legitimate and who isn't. Can you give us any advice on that front? What is a sanctuary? What is good? What is bad? And how do we know?
Yeah, I would say it really kind of depends on your values. So if you are looking for a place that is actively contributing to conservation and recovery, those places likely will not allow you to be taking your photo with a wolf, because one of the primary things that's really crucial in an animal's candidacy for release into the wild is their fear of people. So we really want to protect that wild and elusive nature. And you can imagine if they're, very consistently interacting with humans or even seeing them at a short distance, that might slowly chip away at their natural wariness of people. So for example, at the Wolf Conservation Center, we have a few wolves that are, a few enclosures that are on exhibit for our on-site visitors to see. All of our tours are guided. We don't want anyone kind of wandering through unaccompanied, not only because that could pose a risk if, they're sticking their fingers in a wolf enclosure, but also because we want folks to come away from a visit with, a lot of new information, a lot of education kind of in their tool belts. And the majority of our enclosures are actually off exhibit. So we don't allow visitors to see them. You can see them virtually. But even those of us that are on site, staff and volunteers, we even avoid those enclosures, because we see that if we spend time kind of on the other side of the fence, over time those wolves might start to lose their fear, especially if they're younger wolves. So really kind of considering the level of interaction that you have, the messaging that these centers kind of put out there, and whether or not they're participating in a lot of these recovery programs. These are just some things to kind of consider when you're looking at places to visit and to donate to.
Okay, so the wolves that people are seeing when they come to visit you, those are resident wolves?
Yes,
They'll always
at least
live
at
there.
the moment. So we have actually 3 ambassador wolves. So our 3 ambassador wolves, they are gray wolves, but their kind of role at the Wolf Conservation Center is as ambassadors. So they sort of serve as representatives for their wild counterparts, or potentially their captive counterparts that are hopefully going to be released into the wild. So, these 3 wolves have been raised by people. And they are socialized, but they're still wild animals. So we actually would consider them to be the 3 most dangerous wolves that we have on site. They are kind of the 3 that you're guaranteed to see, and they're the 3 that visitors or supporters near and far are most familiar with, because they're curious about people, and that's a really unusual attribute in wolves. They're naturally very fearful, very hesitant about being near people, but these 3 have been around people every day of their lives. So it's a program that we're kind of constantly reevaluating, because these 3 wolves will never get a chance to be released into the wild. They will live at the Wolf Conservation Center for the rest of their lives. 2 of them are 10 years old and 1 is 7. And, that's a big sacrifice. And so we respect that it's a really enormous sacrifice, and we always want to kind of reevaluate whether this is something that we should continue. But in the meantime, we want to make their lives as enriched as possible. So we make sure that we introduce them to lots of different scents, lots of different experiences. They have a really vast natural enclosure. So even if they weren't too keen on being around people, they could easily avoid us.
Yeah.
But visitors are kind of part of their enrichment as well, kind of seeing new people. They're very curious. But, without them, I think it would be difficult for people to kind of make that connection to the other wolves that we have on site. I'd say maybe 20% of the programs that I teach with people on site, they actually get to see some of the other wolves in those enclosures, and that's really just chance, whether those wolves are feeling curious that day or whether they happen to be napping in a spot that's visible. But all of our enclosures are quite large and really wild, because we want them to feel like they have somewhere that they can hunker down and avoid us, because that's what they would naturally do.
Yeah,
so
I will say that I'm not a big fan of any animal in captivity, but I do like your enclosures. And if it's going to be done, then people have a look at what they're doing at the Wolf Conservation Centre, because it is very wild and natural, isn't it? These aren't concrete cells that these wolves are living in. It looks like they've got everything that they need there.
Yes, and we give them kind of natural dens. Sometimes they'll dig their own dens. We do very minimal landscaping in the enclosures, because we really want them to feel lush and wild. But even us, we don't want more wolves in captivity than is absolutely necessary. So it's a strange thing to say, but it would be great if someday the Wolf Conservation Center would could close because we weren't needed anymore. So it's kind of an interesting thing to say when it is currently my job, but we exist because the wolves need our help. So it's something that we're always thinking about as well. And it's why we're so committed to kind of protecting their wild nature, because we really want it to feel as wild as it possibly can, when wolves are living behind a fence.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about your ambassador wolves, who I would have thought that most of my listeners are very familiar with. I know Zephyr for sure, I always remember him, but I don't remember the other 2. Sorry, guys. Can you tell us a little bit about them?
Yes, absolutely. So Zephyr's actually on my business cards. He's kind of the one that everyone really falls in love with. He really hams it up for people. So Zephyr, Alewa, and Nakai, they are all full siblings. Zephyr and Alewa are litter mates, so they were born at the same time. It was actually a litter of 10 pups that they were born to, and they just turned 10 years old in April. They've lived at the Wolf Conservation Center, pretty much their entire lives. They came here when they were just a few weeks old, and that was really crucial so that they could kind of immediately enter the socialization program. So for wolves to be comfortable being around people, visitors come with different perfumes on, or some might have loud voices, or young children, funny hats, big umbrellas, things like that. It's really crucial that the wolves are comfortable in these situations, not only for their own sake, but also so visitors do get a chance to see them. So when those wolves were quite young, they were with people that we called their pup nannies. So they were members of our staff, some long-term volunteers, and they basically had shifts where they would spend time with these wolf pups. They were with people 24/7. They even had a canine pup nanny who was our animal curator's German Shepherd named Kai.
Oh.
Yeah, and he was really crucial as well, because you can imagine that, you know, with wolves that are going to be here their whole lives, we don't want them getting comfortable playing with people, playing tug of war and things like that. But he was able to kind of be that canine influence that they would have got if they were, you know, growing up in a wild pack. So he was able to play with them. He was also able to correct them, kind of teach them boundaries that they normally would have learned. So although he wasn't a wolf, he was a really great influence on them and their socialization. And Nakai came 3 years later. That's when he was born. And so he went through the same process, but without his older siblings, and then was later kind of introduced to them and really seemed to hit it off right away. Wolves are great at accepting young pups. They're, you know, very parental. So even though they were older siblings, they were very excited to have this kind of pesky younger brother. So he joined his siblings, and now all three of them live in this enclosure full time. They don't come in the winter when it's snowing. They actually much prefer to be out in the cold weather. But they are, you know, really crucial for reaching people. I can't even imagine how many people they must have reached just by being there or kind of having a presence on our social media pages. And they really inspire people to action. And that's so crucial.
It is very, very important. Dana, how many wolves are there in the USA? Which species are they? I just heard you mention 2 different species there. Where are they distributed, and are any of them endangered?
So there are currently in the continental US, about 7,000 wolves. Alaska has another somewhere between 7,000 to 11,000. But to kind of put it into historical context, there were thought to be about 250,000 wolves throughout throughout North America before settlers and colonizers came and really began to eradicate them from the landscape. So although that might sound like a lot, you know, it's nothing compared to their historical numbers. And right now they really occupy only about 10% of their historic range. Of these wolves, or in the world, I should say, there are 2 species of wolves. So there's the gray wolf, which is the wolf that we're kind of all familiar with, and the red wolf. So the red wolf is its own distinct species, and it's native to kind of the southeastern US. They really sort of ranged throughout the East Coast all the way down to maybe Texas, but that's really kind of where they were limited. Gray wolves, though, have multiple subspecies. So in the US, there are about 5 recognized subspecies. And of them, the Mexican gray wolf is endangered. So there's the Mexican gray wolf, the Great Plains wolf, the Canadian or Rocky Mountain wolf, the Eastern Algonquin wolf, and the Arctic gray wolf. So they will kind of, you know, differ depending on where they range geographically. Sometimes morphologically they look really different. So for example, the Arctic gray wolf is completely white, as you would imagine an Arctic animal would be, and much larger. But the Mexican gray wolf is the one that we really focus on. Our ambassador wolves we call them gray wolves, but technically they're Rocky Mountain wolves, to be kind of more specific.
Okay. Can you tell us about the breeding program? You were just touching on that earlier on. You have wolves that don't see people because, you know, you're wanting to release them. How successful are wolves at breeding in captivity? Are they shy, or do they not mind? Are they quite successful?
So our program is very managed. So the Mexican gray wolf and the red wolf are part of something called the Species Survival Plan, or the SSP. And basically this is a federal recovery program that is dedicated to protecting these species, but also maximizing genetic diversity. So for a little context, both the Mexican gray wolf and the red wolf at one point were completely extinct in the wild. So the only remaining individuals were in captivity. So for red wolves, they got down to as low as 14 individuals. And for Mexican gray wolves, they got down to 7 individuals. So now their populations of almost 500 Mexican grays and maybe a little under 300 for the red wolves at present. They came from those really small founding populations.
Okay.
So you can imagine they are very closely related. So there's a lot that goes into deciding which wolves are permitted to breed with which other wolves. So they will have kind of these annual meetings. So the red wolf SSP or the Mexican gray wolf SSP, they'll kind of get together with their advisors and all of these different facilities and take a look at the wolves that they have in captivity, their genetic history. They have something called a stud book, which really kind of outlines each individual wolf, where they descended from, and trying to kind of make proper pairs so that we can increase that genetic diversity as much as possible. So in terms of their success, I don't know if I have a number based on kind of their success rate on breeding in captivity, but survival rate for pups is certainly quite a bit higher. In the wild, you know, pups, really only about 50% of them will survive to their first birthdays. In captivity, it's typically much higher, at least 75% will survive. So, and you can imagine, I mean, it's a bit of a softer existence to live in captivity. All your food's delivered, you're vaccinated, you don't have to fight for territory.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah, but even knowing that, we want them to live in the wild. It's really what they would prefer, I'm sure. But, you know, so we will make these pairs, and sometimes it's a matter of just kind of physically putting those wolves together. So we'll do kind of an introductory period where they have, you know, just one fence line separating them so they can see each other, smell each other, but can't really get to one another. And then eventually after at least a few weeks, maybe longer, we'll kind of open the gates and let them really kind of exist with one another. And this will all happen a little bit prior to breeding season, which is January through March. And then we kind of cross our fingers and hope that it's a love connection. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't, but we will kind of watch a lot of our webcams and really note whether we see potential courtship behavior or if we see actual breeding, and we'll kind of really mark up our calendars and figure out, okay, you know, 63 days from this date where we saw them breed is a potential whelping date. So when we might see pups. Right now, we're kind of winding down that pupping season. This year we had 3 breeding pairs, 2 pairs of red wolves and 1 pair of Mexican gray wolves. And we saw some promising behaviors from some of them, but it looks like we're not going to have any pups this year, and that happens. But, you know, we are really lucky that we're able to kind of observe these situations, and we have had pups in the past, and this year seems like not so much of a pup year, but that's okay.
They are quite good at relationships, aren't they, wolves? So do they ever produce pups more than once if they like each other?
Yes, so wolves are monogamous, so they will maintain these kind of relationships and these bonds with their mates or their partners. And we have had quite a few wolves that have had multiple litters with one another. One that I'm thinking of right now is these 2 wolves that we call Trumpet and Lighthawk. And they've had so far 2 litters together, and they have just a very clear, strong bond. Even after periods of separation, they just kind of, when they're reunited, they love each other, or anthropomorphizing a little bit, but they're quite close. So they've been very successful, but we've had quite a few that have had multiple litters with one another. And we love to see that.
Somebody at your organisation must feel a bit like sort of a dating agency for wolves, really.
Yeah. When you really
them up, and am I going to be successful or not? Because they won't. If they don't like each other, they're not going to have any of it, are they? So
exactly.
When you get that pups, you really get it right, don't you? Okay, so let's talk about the captive born wolves. How do you make them ready for release?
That's a great question. So most of the wolves that get released into the wild are born in captivity. So, you know, they've never had to hunt for themselves. They've never really lived in the wild and all the kind of risks and potential threats that kind of go along with that. So at least at the Wolf Conservation Center, like I mentioned before, we really work hard to protect their wild and elusive nature. If a wolf becomes too comfortable around people, that might automatically disqualify them as candidates for release. And we don't want something like that to be the reason that they can't be released into the wild. Another thing that we do is that we feed them natural diets. So although we can't release, a live deer into their enclosures for them to hunt for ethical reasons, safety reasons, just logistics in general, we do still feed them their natural diets. So for us in New York, that is road-killed white-tailed deer. So that's really what they would kind of be eating in the wild, or some sort of relative, an ungulate basically. But because in our area there are no natural predators of deer any longer, we do have a bit of an overpopulation, and we see that leads to a lot of deer being hit by vehicles. So instead of letting that go to waste, folks will bring the deer to us. They'll call us and let us know the location. The police departments will bring them, Department of Transportation. So we're very lucky that usually our costs, at least for feeding the wolves, is zero. So, eating their natural prey is a good form of enrichment. We've participated in studies where it shows that it really supports their kind of natural gut flora. And so that, of course, is going to make their transition to the wild, if they get that chance, a little bit easier, because there's not really much of a food transition. They're eating what they've been eating their whole lives. And then, like I said, we maximize the genetic diversity as well. So, their genetic makeup as well as their behaviors are kind of the main components that go into who might be released into the wild. We actually just a few weeks ago had one of our red wolves by the name of Devin, that's his nickname. He was released into the wild in North Carolina. He had been born at the Wolf Conservation Center, and of his siblings, he was really the most wary of people. He was very shy, and that kind of made him really stand out as when we were looking for who might be a good candidate. He really stood out as a potential perfect individual to have that chance. So he was released a few weeks ago with a female and some other wolves kind of in the area, and we're hopeful that it will be a very successful release and that he'll get to, live his life in the wild forever. So it's very exciting.
Do you think that those two wolves will form their own pack, or is it possible for them to maybe be accepted by a larger pack, or does that not happen?
It's possible. At the time of their release, there were only 10 red wolves living in the wild. And they were actually kind of released because Fish and Wildlife Service hadn't released red wolves into the wild since 2014. So they were actually sued and told, we need to get more wolves into the wild. This program is really kind of falling by the wayside. So 4 adult red wolves and 4 young pups were released, and those pups were actually cross-fostered. So they were really, really young. Their eyes weren't even open yet, and they were actually placed into a den with a lactating female that was already living in the wild. So it's possible. The hope is that he will have really bonded with the female that he was kind of introduced to, and that they might either start their own group or maybe join an existing one. But there isn't really much of an opportunity to join any other groups since the population was so small to start with.
Okay. What is the legal status of the wolf? Are they protected? Can people shoot them?
So right now, gray wolves, unfortunately, do not have federal protections. So at the start of the year, they were delisted from the Endangered Species Act. Normally, when an animal is delisted, that should really be a cause to celebrate. It should be a sign that they have kind of reached a stable population size, that scientists really agree, okay, we've done it, we've recovered the species, we don't have to have such a tight grip anymore. But for gray wolves, the vast majority of scientists really disagreed, and it's unfortunate that they were delisted. And our fear was that once they lose those federal protections, their management gets turned over to the state level. And frequently what happens then is that those states right away will open up for hunting. And we saw it almost immediately with the state of Wisconsin, that they actually sued to have a hunting season because that window for that year was kind of closing for them, and they thought, okay, you know, there's a good chance that gray wolves might get relisted to the Endangered Species Act, so we want to get this hunt in right away. So the hunt was initially set for a week, and the quota was, I believe, 119 wolves could be killed. And within 60 hours, they had to shut the hunt down because they had exceeded the quota by 82%.
God, what does that say about us?
And that is just the numbers that were recorded. I mean, we imagine that a few more wolves, maybe handfuls, were likely poached. And, you know, it's really unfortunate because that happened in March, which is breeding season. And so likely some of those were pregnant females.
Oh, that makes me so cross. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, it was devastating. And it was kind of the perfect example of what was to come. And so, and it's not really just about us being sentimental and loving wolves. Wolves have an enormously important role in the ecosystem. And we see that with their removal, I mean, there's so much collapse. They're a keystone species. They maintain a lot of really crucial balance. And when we get rid of them or even just disrupt their pack structures, I mean, we see a lot of fallout from that. And so it's really upsetting. And there's really no scientific support that shows that lethal removal of wolves is a sound management strategy. So it's frustrating to want people to listen to science and they don't.
So are people wanting to shoot them because they're taking livestock? I hate that word, but because they're doing that, because they're afraid of them, or let's just say it because I can, I'm an independent station, just because they want to kill something?
I think it's a combination of those factors. You know, there's this misconception that wolves are really, you know, attacking livestock and, you know, really responsible for a lot of their deaths. Again, these are animals that are being raised to be slaughtered. But in reality, wolves are only responsible for under 1% of
tiny amount,
deaths.
isn't it?
Yeah,
tiny amount.
It is minuscule. I mean, they're far more likely to be struck by lightning, to break an ankle in a hole in a field. And again, a lot of these animals, a lot of these cattle are being raised on public lands. So this is land that we all own as, you know, citizens of the United States, and you know, farmers and ranchers can rent it for a few dollars per animal, and they displace the native wild animals that are there. Wolves are territorial, so if they're displacing their prey, well, what's left? Maybe a cow or a sheep or something like that. They don't know the difference. And so we're seeing a lot of these problems that we've really caused. And then if you think about it just kind of culturally, you know, a lot of the stories we grow up with are Little Red Riding Hood, the Three Little Pigs, The Boy Who Cried Wolf. And so we're told that wolves are these fearsome beasts that are going to chase us through the woods, that they're going to eat grandma, that they're going to do all these horrible things. And in reality, I mean, they're petrified of us. And we see that. I always try to point it out when visitors don't see our endangered wolves, that this is what wolves are really like. They're in maybe an 1.5 acre enclosure, maybe a little larger, and you're not seeing any sign of them because they don't want you to. So yeah, there's a lot of misconceptions, and it's really unfortunate.
Yeah, I mean, I know people who spend huge amounts of time in their lives trying to see wolves. They know where they are, but they can't see them because the wolves won't allow it. Oh dear. Okay, let's have a talk about scientific research. It's quite an important thing. Is your centre involved in scientific research that helps the wolves in any way?
So we have been involved in a few studies, and we're actually very lucky in that we're one of a few centers that has been able to participate in artificial inseminations of some of our female wolves. Not with any success, but it is a bit of a learning curve. So in the few years that centers have been attempting artificial insemination, there has been one single pup that was successfully born via the process. So although it's something that we do, you know, with dogs and horses and people, it's still relatively new with wolves. But once we kind of figure out that process, and we work with reproductive specialists on this, it could really be a game changer for the recovery program, because as it is right now, you physically have to have these wolves together, and sometimes they like each other, sometimes they don't. It's a toss-up, and even just kind of the travel from one facility to another, it's very stressful. So there's a lot of risk factors that kind of go into it. But artificial insemination could mean that, we could really make these combinations to increase genetic diversity. We could use samples from wolves that maybe have since passed on, or maybe have since been released. We do annual semen collections from our male wolves, and a lot of that is to get an idea of the development, but sometimes to bank it and store it for potential future use.
Okay.
So we've been really lucky that we've been able to participate in a lot of these kind of processes at the forefront of this research and just science in general. It's very exciting.
Yeah, and none of these procedures are invasive as such, are they?
Artificial insemination and semen collection, they are a bit invasive, but,
Nobody dies, that's what I mean. Okay.
No. Anytime you do anything like that, of course there's a risk, and we try to be as respectful as possible. We've never had any issue with that, but with our endangered wolves, for example, when we do their annual health checks, they're actually fully conscious, because we really want to minimize the use of chemical immobilization or anything like that, because just like with people, anytime you're put under sedation, there's always a risk factor there. So we try to make those processes as quick as possible, and they are conscious, and it does reinforce their fear of people, which is good, but we're very respectful that it's really stressful for them. It's kind of an alien abduction. They don't want to be around us, so we try to make it as quick and seamless as possible.
Okie dokie. In the UK, we do not have wolves anymore, sadly, as you well know, and most people I speak to are wolf friendly, but this isn't the case for those in other countries, such as yours, who have wolf neighbours. Can you tell us what causes the human-wolf conflict in America?
I would say a lot of it, again, is kind of those misconceptions that we talked about, just a real misunderstanding of wolf behavior, the risk of living around wolves, which is pretty minimal. But a lot of it, is fear for someone's children, fear for their pets, fear for their livelihood if they have, livestock grazing. But again, there isn't really science that supports lethal removal of wolves. It doesn't seem to have the impact that people want. Removing wolves or other large predators from the landscape creates a vacuum. It's vacant territory, it's desirable territory, so who wouldn't move in? So sometimes you have animals that come in that don't necessarily understand the rules, quote unquote, and so it doesn't necessarily, get rid of that issue that they were trying to address. It also will disrupt, stable packs, and so sometimes you have younger individuals who don't really know what they're doing, going after animals that we don't want them to target. So there's a lot of issues there. But there's a lot of studies that show that non-lethal management methods are really effective. So having a human presence, range riders, so folks on horseback kind of just periodically, having a presence around the animals, using something called flagry, which is basically a wire that has flagging on it, so it flaps in the wind. Sometimes it's reflective, and wolves are afraid of novel things, so seeing something like that is oftentimes enough to deter them from crossing that boundary. There's really a lot of things, and we'll see that sometimes people won't remove carcasses from their land, and of course it's going to attract other animals. So really just a matter of taking these steps and applying them, and you'll really see a major difference. So a lot of the conflict is just kind of people maybe not doing everything they should do or could do, because oftentimes shooting a wolf might be easier than maintaining an active presence with your livestock. And that's really unfortunate because it's not going to solve anything.
No. If you wanted to shoot a wolf, can you just go out and shoot it, or do you have to get permission or a permit from somebody?
Typically you need permits or tags if it's like a kind of a hunting season.
Yeah.
But, you know, sometimes you can remove a wolf if they are potentially a threat or perceived to be a threat to your animals or to yourself. But again, you know, that's really up to interpretation. And sometimes people might deliberately leave carcasses, things like that, out to attract them and then claim that they feel threatened. And then, you know, for our endangered species, legally you can't kill them, but that doesn't mean that we don't see poaching. That has happened quite a bit, and sometimes we never find out. But it is really unfortunate that a lot of people just, you know, doesn't matter the rules, they have no desire to coexist, and they're just going to remove them and figure it out later.
When they're killed, what happens to the carcasses? I'm using lots of words that I don't like, listeners.
I know.
I don't normally use. I'm so sorry, wolves. What do they do with them?
It really depends. I mean, sometimes they will just hide the evidence. There is something that, you know, people call shoot, shovel, and shut up. And so they will, get rid of them and not speak. People are not very good at actually shutting up. So, you know, sometimes they will reveal what they've done. But, you know, we've seen that for some animals that have GPS collars on to track their movements, people will try to tamper with those collars. Sometimes, you know, they might get dumped along the side of the road. I mean, I've worked on research projects where collars were tampered with and people, you know, put them at the bottom of an icy stream. Well, these collars are made to, you know, withstand all weather. So oftentimes that doesn't actually, you know, make them
not terribly bright,
non-functional.
these people that do the shooting. Sorry, I'm doing it again, aren't I? Going to get into terrible trouble.
But yeah, I mean, it's really unfortunate. So sometimes people, you know, they might report it and say, listen, I felt threatened, or they were caught in a trap, I didn't know what to do, or they'll, you know, make up some story. But it is always incredibly tragic when something like that happens. And it's really not something that we want to see, but it does certainly happen.
Yeah. Is there any value in the pelt or anything? There's another word that's bad, but I've said it.
For an endangered species, I can't imagine that you would really get much for them without immediately getting caught. So you'd probably end up paying more than you'd actually make. But, you know, there are places where it is legal to hunt wolves, and I'm sure that they will try to sell those pelts or use them. And a lot of the time, it's really just the thrill of the kill. They just, you know, want to have dominion over wildlife, and yeah, we don't like to see it.
Oh dear. Okay, let's talk about something nice before we say goodbye. Let's talk about your education on site. I'm quite excited about the things that you do. Can you tell us a bit about that?
We have webcams that are available, so those are free as well.
They're
so fun. Yeah. All of our wolf enclosures have 2 cameras in them. And this is especially crucial for those wolves that I talked about that are off exhibit. They're not hidden from view. I mean, we want people to get to know them, but of course without influencing their behaviors. So you can kind of really get a view into their natural lives, see them play with their family members, eat. We'll often see them chasing ravens off of their food. You know, of course, breeding season, sometimes we see them breed. Pup season, we often get to see those little pups tumbling around. So we have cameras, kind of, we call one the enclosure camera, which is usually affixed to a fence or a tree, and then one inside a den inside their enclosures. And those den cameras, especially during pup season, I mean, we've had people tune in from all over the world to see these little endangered wolf pups be born, which is kind of a dose of magic, but it's also such a great education tool because people really fall in love and they start to learn about what we do and these endangered species and why it's so important that we do everything we can to protect them. So now, you know, in the age of the internet, it's really great to have our website where we can really reach a lot of people, all of our social media pages. It's great to be able to kind of connect all over the world with people.
Yeah, I spend hours watching your webcams, and I've never seen a wolf. So when you get back to work, can you have a word with them? Because I think that they're saying, oh, that flipping mad British radio woman's watching us again. Hide, everybody. And I'm I'm missing meetings sometimes. No, because I'll be out in a minute. I'm sure I've been here for 3 hours. They're bound to come out, but they do.
I have a monitor sometimes where I have them up right there. Yeah, it's sometimes hit or miss because the camera doesn't span the entire enclosure. So sometimes you'll see a flash of them in the distance, but we do have some volunteers that try to stay on top of them and will try to move them around. But yeah, sometimes you're looking and you're like, am I missing something? There must be. With the ambassador wolves, you usually won't see them. And that's actually our only camera that has audio. So sometimes you'll hear them howling. But yes, it can definitely be a little frustrating when you're like, okay, I can't move the camera. I'd really like to see a wolf. But when you do get those moments, it is just so fascinating. And you get to see them communicate. You get to see them groom one another, take naps together. It's so special.
I absolutely love what you do. Now, our listeners must do something for you today. Dana, what would you like us to do to help you at the Wolf Conservation Centre?
So, things that we really love people to do are take action. And sometimes that's as simple as, sending an email, signing a petition. One thing that you can do is actually sign up for our email list. That's probably the most direct way to really stay up to date, but I understand that not everyone wants to be on yet another email list. So on our website, which is www.nywolf.org, so NY as in New York, we have a page that says Save the Wolves. And if you click that, you can see Join Us, which is our email list, Advocate, and typically under Advocate, we have kind of calls to action. So things like that. But there's also, a page where you can donate goods and services. You can do symbolic adoptions, which is one of the best birthday presents you can give them, at least to me. I think it's so special to basically sign up for a year to get updates on the wolf that you adopted. Depending on the package, you can get a little plush toy. You can get all these nice things. So there's lots of different ways that you can help. But, taking information that you learned today and telling your friends and family, dismantling a lot of the stigma that is really stacked up against wolves, that's really crucial. It's undeserved that they have so many people that really don't understand them. So it's as simple as just talking about them and saying, hey, I learned something new, and I learned that, our conceptions and the way we think about and talk about wolves, it's not really all that accurate. So there are a lot of different ways that you can really contribute to their recovery.
Super duper. Now, where can people find you on social media? I know you're on Twitter, aren't you? And your handle is NY, and I've forgotten the rest.
It's nywolf.org. So it's just our website, basically, at Twitter. On Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and actually recently we added Twitch. We're just Wolf Conservation Center. So honestly, you could probably just search Wolf Conservation Center and then whatever platform.
Or just go to the website, listeners, and then you can just go click, 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 click on those little icons and go and add them all to your feed. Dana, it's been wonderful talking to you. Thank you so much for zooming in to us from New York and telling us everything we need to know about wolves. And hopefully my listeners will support you. Thank you very much for coming in.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Michelle. I had so much fun.
Very well.